Hey guys, Steve here again with Enviado Global, and welcome back to my channel. If you remember, if you saw my last video on Syria and what's happening in Syria with the Assad regime being overthrown by the rebel forces after over 13 years of a civil war. I think it was March 15th, 2011, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's when the initial uprising began, which led into the Civil War. And forgive me if you hear rain. I am outside on my patio, but it is a beautiful night out here. So, anyways, back to this. So, Assad is out. The reports are he's got, based on humanitarian reasons, he's in Moscow, Russia at this time. And so while on one end, there's a lot of people celebrating, and rightfully so. Assad was a brutal dictator. His father was a brutal dictator. Over 3 decades of brutal dictatorness, if that's a word. And there are many people, numerous people, who are talking about or saying that Christians were safer under Assad versus what's happening right now. The answer to that, because I do tend to focus on Christians, because I am one, yes and no. Okay? Hear me out. On one end, yes, because Assad was not intentionally, systematically targeting them. Okay? He didn't necessarily have a plan that says, hey, let's annihilate, let's eliminate, let's oppress the Christians. Okay? I don't see any evidence that he intentionally did that on a broad level. On the flip side, despite what many people are claiming that they were safer, the other side of that reality is that Christians were killed under Assad by actions approved by Assad, planned by Assad. Okay, there are stories out there. I found some today where people were talking about Syrian Christians who fled Syria, were talking about the oppressiveness that they experienced at the hands of their Assad regime. So were Christians systematically targeted? Probably not. Were they safer under Assad? That depends on where they lived. Okay, if they were in the urban centers, Aleppo, Damascus, a few other places where Assad had total control, probably. Was he protecting them from ISIS, al-Qaeda, and other terrorist organizations? Yes, but it's not so black and white. Okay, they were protected because of where they were at, not because of who they are. They weren't protected from these terrorist organizations because they were Christians. Okay, Christians weren't protected because they were Christians. They were protection because of proximity to Assad and his military and the control he had in areas. And as long as they were in those areas, they were safe. Okay? But on the other side of that coin, many of them became economically disadvantaged. Okay? They became economically oppressed. Jobs were scarce for many. And so they fled. Many Christians in Syria fled. It went from 10% pre-Civil War in 2011 to 2% as of 2022. Now we're 2024, about to enter 2025, so it's probably even lower than that. Okay? So the numbers of Christians have diminished, and even those who were economically or had economic advantage, here's my observation on this. And this is as someone who has friendships with Syrian Christians from Syria. Syrians who are refugees around Syria. Syrian friends with Syrians who have family members in Syria. Okay, I'm not just some American 6,000 miles away from the epicenter of that civil war, just throwing off my opinions. I've actually had countless conversations with Syrian Christians about this topic for almost 2 years now. Actually longer than 2 years, because my initial interaction with them began in 2021. Okay, so it's been 3.5 years that I've had conversations like this. And in fact, I was just with some a few weeks ago, having again more conversations. I've had conversations since then with these same people, especially since the toppling of Assad, to find out what's going on with their parents, how are things going. And I'm going to get into some things that the Christians are actually saying today. Okay, but I wanted to kind of give you a bigger picture of what's going on, because the last video was, it was early on. Now, I'm giving you a bigger picture of what's happened and whether Christians are safe or not. And I would argue not necessarily under Assad. And in fact, I would argue that Assad manipulated them. I asked around this week, the last couple of days, what were these Syrian Christians that I know, what were they thinking? What are their parents thinking back in Syria? What are their siblings thinking back in Syria? You know, what's going on? Well, number one, I've learned that some of them have had to flee from Aleppo and Damascus to get to other places where they felt safer. Okay, so let's get into what they were saying after I just made that comment. So the first thing that was brought up to me is there was a sense of hopefulness. Okay, it sounds kind of odd after everything I just said, but there was a sense of hopefulness in being salt and light, good Samaritans, and among the Syrian community at large. There was a sense of hopefulness because there's many opportunities for them to serve and meet the needs of other people, whether they're Christians or Muslims, it didn't matter, Yazidis or Druids, or irregardless of their religious belief. There is hopefulness that they could go and be the salt and light of Christ where they're at. Okay, so that's good. Turn the coin. After they said there is hopefulness, they also said they're scared about what's next. And the ones that even more, now there's multiple ones. There's multiple Christian groups in Syria, because Syria is a very diverse place ethnically. But the one group that, according to people I was speaking with, that's really scared are Kurds. Kurdish Christians are scared. The other thing they said is the situation is complicated. It's not binary. It's not a binary situation. It's not black and white. It is complex. It is complicated. And so we need to stop just taking people who have no experience over there as taking their word for it as if they've got all the answers and it's just one way or another. It's not. You know, one thing I learned after living in China, you know, China is so big and vast, and there's a lot of ethnicities there. And granted, there is one major people group called the Han that pretty much rule the country. One thing I learned by living in China and being around the Chinese people for so long is I heard so many times, China is like this, whatever this is, XYZ. Problem is, everything they said was true somewhere, but it was not true everywhere. That's how diverse China is. And just because my experience in China was one way doesn't mean it's the experience of other people in another place, whether they be foreigner, whether they be Chinese, whether they be Uyghurs or Hui Muslims or Buddhists, Tibetan Buddhists or whatever. The experiences were always vast and wide. Same thing's happening in Syria. The experiences are vast and wide, which means there is no binary situation going on. There is no black and white situation. It is different everywhere. Christians may feel safe in one little part, but they definitely don't feel safe in other parts, okay? So take everything with a grain of salt, as it's true, might be true for someone, but it's definitely not true for everyone. And the last thing they said, which really is just kind of a repeat, but this is the way they said it. They feel more concerned about life right now than they feel happy. So again, I'd argue they weren't technically safer they were safer under Assad, but not the way most people think as safer in the sense that Assad was intentionally protecting them. They were safe because they knew the ones who were safe, let me put it like this, the ones who were safe, because there are definitely ones who were not, the ones who were safe knew the poison in front of them. They knew how to deal with the poison in front of them, how to communicate with that, how to deal with that, how to handle that, how to make decisions based on that. And now there's a new poison or a potential poison in front of them. They don't know what to do. All they know is that the group that led the charge of the overthrow of Assad, HTS, the leader of HTS has links and connections, official connections in the past to terrorist organizations. And HTS is considered a terrorist organization itself right now by the EU, by America, by the UK, and even by a country that's angry at all those, Turkey. Okay, it's considered one. So I think it is wise as Christians to be cautious about what's around the corner. And there's legitimate reason for these Christians to be concerned and scared. Legitimate reasons, okay? Because if anything from these past connections related to HTS and its leader come to fruition, it could be bad. Now, maybe what's being said and the moderate views and the moderate conversations that are being publicly declared by them, maybe they happen. Man, praise God if it does. I know a lot of people are praying that it does, and we hope that it does. But the Middle East is complex. It's not, as I said, binary. And to just assume that it's about to get better for everyone is misreading the whole situation altogether. Okay? Why are people celebrating? Well, predominantly, Muslims are celebrating, rightfully so. So many of them were oppressed by Assad, imprisoned, political prisoners, everything, and they should have been released. And it was a horrific, brutal dictatorship, no question. And they're released and they're happy. And for certain groups of people, it's definitely a time of celebration. And it's a time they feel peace, they feel joy, they feel relief, they feel freedom. And they should. But this channel isn't so much about them as it is about Christians. Okay, so keep praying for them, because the road for Christians in Syria is extremely uncertain, despite this transitional government that's been put in place, which I haven't verified it, but I've seen multiple reports say that the leader of this, the prime minister of the transitional government up until I think March 15th of next year, is part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Some people say that's good. Some people say it's bad. It can be good or bad, I guess. I don't know. We'll see what happens. There was a concerning image of flags behind him, but and maybe what they might represent. But that was just one article that I saw, and I'm going to keep looking it up and see what's going on. So anyways, I just say, as a believer, as a Christian, to other Christians who are watching this, pray for them. Be cautious what you think is happening. And if you know any Syrian Christians, just keep encouraging them, because they need it. And they need to know that the global Christian community is with them. Okay? Whether they're Protestant, Catholic, evangelical, whatever. Let them know that we stand with them in solidarity, that we're praying for them and hoping for the best. Anyways, as I get more information from my friends, my Syrian friends especially, and those who work with them on the ground in terms of humanitarian ways, I will let you know. Okay? So until then, I'll see you next time.